You know nothing about this. The millionaire laughed, looking at the humble young woman. The silence in Northern Star Pharmaceuticals' boardroom was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sophia Clark clutched her tablet to her chest as if it were a shield, feeling the crushing weight of 20 pairs of judging eyes. She was 23, dressed in thrift store clothes, and held a secret no one in that room of millionaire executives could imagine. Seriously? They brought an intern to present the year's most important strategy? Edward Morgan's voice cut through the air like a knife. The 58-year-old CEO looked at her with a mix of cruel amusement and absolute disdain, his fingers drumming on the imported mahogany table that cost more than Sophia's annual salary. Mr. Morgan, Monica Dubois, the director of innovation, who had risked her career to give Sophia this opportunity, intervened. Miss Clark has developed an analysis I believe you should hear. An analysis? Edward let out a dry laugh that echoed off the glass walls. Monica, this girl probably doesn't even know how to properly use Excel. Why waste important people's time with this? Sophia felt the heat rise to her cheeks, but not from shame. It was rage, pure and burning rage that had been accumulating for 6 months of being invisible in that company, of hearing whispered comments about the charity scholarship kid, of seeing her work attributed to others while she continued to serve coffee in meetings where her ideas were stolen. With all due respect, Mr. Morgan, Sophia spoke, her voice trembling but firm. Yes, I know how to use Excel, and also Python, R, SQL, and probably a dozen tools half the people in this room have never touched. The silence that followed was absolute. Several executives exchanged nervous glances. No one spoke to Edward Morgan like that. Never. The man had built $1 billion pharmaceutical empire, ruthless with competitors and employees alike. Edward leaned back in his chair, a predatory smile crossing his artificially tanned face. Ah, so we have a rebel here. How refreshing. His tone dripped with sarcasm. Tell me, child, where did you study? At some public university with teachers who couldn't get jobs in the private sector. At the University of Toronto, Sophia replied, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her hands. On a full academic merit scholarship, top of my class. How impressive. Edward applauded slowly, mockingly. Top of a class of poor students who will never be able to pay off their student loans. Very inspiring. Monica intervened again, her voice tense. Mr. Morgan, if you could just give her 10 minutes to present. 10 minutes. Edward cut her off with a dismissive wave of his hand. Do you know how much my time is worth? $1,000 a minute. Do you really want me to waste $10,000 listening to someone who probably doesn't even understand how our industry works? Sophia gritted her teeth. What Edward didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that she understood the pharmaceutical industry better than all of them combined. Not because of her degrees or formal education, but because of devastatingly personal experience. Sir, she tried once more. If you would allow me to show you the data analysis I prepared on your 3 flagship drugs. Your analysis? Edward leaned forward, his cold eyes piercing her like knives. Let me explain something about the real world, child. You know nothing about this. Nothing. You've been here what? 6 months as an intern. I've been in this industry for 35 years. I built this company from the ground up. And you think you, a child who probably still lives with her parents, are going to teach me something about my own business? The other executives remained in uncomfortable silence. Some looked at their phones, pretending not to see the public humiliation. Others watched with morbid curiosity, like spectators at an execution. I don't live with my parents, Sophia said softly, so softly that Edward had to lean in to hear. What did you say? I said I don't live with my parents, she repeated louder, and something in her tone made the room tense. I can't live with them because my mother died 3 years ago. The change in atmosphere was instantaneous. Monica brought a hand to her mouth. A couple of executives looked away uncomfortably, but Edward surprisingly smiled even wider. How tragic, he said, without a shred of genuine sympathy. But this is a business, not a therapy session. Your personal problems don't interest me. What interests me is not wasting more time with amateur presentations from interns who think they're smarter than they are. My mother died, Sophia continued, her voice now louder, firmer, laden with an emotion that made every word resonate like a bell, because she couldn't afford the medication she needed. A medication your company manufactures. A medication that costs $20 to produce, and you sell for $2,000. The silence that fell over the room was so profound you could hear the distant hum of the air conditioning. Edward stopped smiling. Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The pharmaceutical pricing system is complex, Edward said finally, his voice losing some of its previous arrogance. There are costs for research, development, regulatory approvals. I know, Sophia interrupted him. And now her tears were falling freely, but her voice remained unbroken. I know exactly how much each step of the process costs, because I spent the last 3 years studying it. Not out of academic curiosity, but because I needed to understand why my mother had to choose between eating and her medicine, why she had to work until the last day of her life cleaning offices, trying to scrape together money for one more dose, just one more dose. Monica now had tears in her eyes. One of the younger executives looked at Sophia with something akin to horror and understanding, and now Sophia opened her tablet with hands that no longer trembled. I'm going to show you exactly what I know. I'm going to show you why your 3 flagship drugs are about to lose $150 million in the next quarter. And I'm going to show you that, yes, I do know something about this. Edward stared at her, his expression oscillating between anger and something harder to identify. $150 million is a very specific figure for an empty threat from a resentful intern. It's not a threat. Sophia connected her tablet to the large screen in the room. It's a projection based on data that your own analysis department is ignoring. Data that I found because, unlike your 6-figure analysts, I actually care about understanding what's happening. The large screen lit up with a complex graph. Sophia had spent entire nights preparing this presentation, using software she had learned on her own, from free YouTube tutorials, because the university couldn't afford expensive licenses. Your drug HeartGuard, she began, her voice now purely professional despite the tears still dampening her cheeks, has a patent expiring in 93 days. Exactly 93 days. But here's what your legal and strategy teams haven't told you. She changed the slide, showing documents she had meticulously compiled. There are 7 generic manufacturers waiting, not 3, as your internal reports indicate. 7. And 3 of them already have regulatory agency approval. They will flood the market exactly on day 94. Edward leaned forward, his cruel amusement replaced by genuine attention mixed with irritation. Where did you get that information? Those are confidential documents. They're public documents, Sophia corrected him. It's just that no one bothered to look for them. They're in the regulatory databases, available to anyone who knows where to look and has the time to read them. Which I did, because interns aren't invited to expensive business dinners. Several executives began taking frantic notes. The chief financial officer, a 60-year-old man named Richard Miller, spoke for the first time. If what she says is true, Mr. Morgan, this is a crisis. Wait. Sophia raised her hand. I'm not finished yet. She switched to another slide. Your second flagship drug, Glycosense, is projected for sales of $120 million next quarter, based on current trends. But you didn't account for a new medical study coming out in exactly 6 weeks. What study? Edward asked sharply. A comparative study from McGill University. Sophia showed the preprint of the paper. It proves that your drug is barely 3% more effective than the generic alternative, which costs 20 times less. And when I say 3%, I mean a statistically insignificant difference. The room erupted in murmurs. Edward slammed his palm on the table, demanding silence. How the hell did you get access to a study that isn't even published yet? Preprints are public, Sophia responded calmly. They're on academic servers that anyone can consult. Again, you just need to know where to look and take the time to read real scientific literature instead of blindly relying on summarized reports from consultants. Monica watched with a mix of horror and admiration. She had known Sophia was brilliant, but this was something else entirely. And the third, Sophia switched to the last section of her presentation. MindMend, your most profitable drug, $90 million in profit last quarter. What about MindMend? Edward asked, now completely focused, no trace of mockery in his voice. There's a class action lawsuit forming. It hasn't been formally filed yet, but lawyers are already gathering cases. 300 patients reporting severe side effects that were not adequately documented in the original clinical trials. That's impossible. The legal director, a woman named Patricia McDonald, jumped in. We constantly monitor for potential litigation. There's nothing on our radar. Because they're using private social media groups to organize, Sophia explained. Facebook groups, specialized forums, places where your traditional monitoring teams aren't looking. But I am. Because when my mother was sick, those social media support groups were our only community. I learned to navigate those spaces. And they're there, planning, organizing, waiting for the right moment to strike. Edward stood up slowly, his hands resting on the table. He was no longer laughing. There was no longer disdain on his face. There was something else, a dangerous mixture of forced respect and fury at having been publicly corrected. "Assuming," he said in a carefully controlled voice, "that everything you say is true, why should I listen to solutions from someone who clearly has an emotional bias against this industry?" "Why?" Sophia responded, looking him directly in the eyes without blinking. "I don't want to destroy this industry. I want to fix it. I want it to work the way it should work. And because, unlike you who see numbers on spreadsheets, I see my mother. I see all the mothers, fathers, children who are dying. Not because the medicine doesn't exist, but because the system is broken." The room remained in absolute silence. "But more importantly," Sophia continued, "because I can show you how to mitigate each of these crises. I have solutions, specific data-driven solutions, that could not only prevent these losses, but turn this into an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" Richard, the CFO, asked, clearly intrigued despite himself. "The kind that could save $150 million and, incidentally, save lives," Sophia replied. "But it will require some people in this room to admit that maybe, just maybe, an intern from a public university might know something you don't." Edward studied her for a long moment. Seconds stretched into hours. Finally, he slowly sat back down. "You have 10 minutes, he said. "Show me what you've got." "I'll need 30, Sophia replied without hesitation. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of Edward's lips. It wasn't kind, but it was recognition. "You have 20. Use them well." Sophia took a deep breath and began the most important presentation of her life. The presentation she had rehearsed hundreds of times in the broken mirror of her shared apartment. The presentation that carried her mother's name, invisibly written on every slide, as she spoke with data she had collected in public libraries because she couldn't afford private databases, with analyses she had done on her 5-year-old laptop, with insights that came not from expensive MBAs, but from nights crying by her mother's hospital bed. Something changed in that room. The executives began taking notes seriously. Questions shifted from skeptical to genuinely interested, and Edward Morgan, the man who minutes earlier had ridiculed her, now watched her with something that could be forced respect, or a cold calculation of how to use this talent to his benefit. When she finished, exactly 20 minutes later, the room was silent. But it was a different silence from the beginning. It wasn't disdain, it was processing. That was Monica began, but Edward interrupted her. "Interesting," he said finally. "Very interesting." He stood up, walked to the window overlooking the city, his hands behind his back. "Tell me, Sophia Clark, what do you expect to gain from all this?" "Nothing," Sophia replied honestly. "I've already lost what mattered most to me." Edward turned sharply. "Everyone wants something. Then I want the next child who sees their mother die because they can't afford medicine to have a different story," Sophia said, and her voice cracked slightly but recovered. "I want this talent that you almost scorned today to serve for something more than making the rich richer." "Youthful idealism," Edward murmured, but without the venom from before. "Richard, verify her numbers. Patricia, investigate the class action lawsuit. Monica, I want a full report on my desk first thing tomorrow." He turned to Sophia. "And you're no longer an intern. Consider this a performance review. If your numbers hold up, and God help you if they don't, we're going to have a very serious conversation about your future in this company." It wasn't exactly praise, but coming from Edward Morgan, it was close to a miracle. As the room emptied, executives looking at Sophia with new curiosity mixed with discomfort, Monica approached and squeezed her shoulder gently. "That was," she whispered, "that was the bravest and most foolish thing I've ever seen anyone do in this company." "Brave or foolish?" Sophia asked with a tired smile. "Both. Definitely both." Sophia left the boardroom with shaky legs, her tablet clutched to her chest, aware that she had crossed a point of no return. She had openly defied the most powerful man in the company. She had revealed her deepest pain in front of strangers. She had risked everything and had no idea if she had won or signed her own dismissal letter. But as she walked down the glass-paneled hallway toward her tiny cubicle in the intern area, passing luxurious offices of people who had ignored her for months, Sophia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't happiness exactly, it was something more complex. It was the knowledge that for the first time since her mother died, her voice had been heard. Her pain meant something. Her rage had purpose. Edward Morgan didn't know he had just awakened something in Sophia Clark that went far beyond a simple data analysis. He had awakened someone who had nothing left to lose. And that, he would soon discover, was the most dangerous thing of all. The hours following the meeting were a whirlwind Sophia was unprepared for. As she returned to her tiny cubicle in the intern area, she could feel stares piercing her back like invisible knives. Some employees watched her with barely disguised curiosity, others with something akin to respect, and a few with thinly veiled envy. "Is it true you made Morgan cry?" Andrew Thompson, another intern who shared her workspace, whispered to her. He was 22 and came from a wealthy family that paid for an apartment in the financial district. "He didn't cry," Sophia replied as she dropped her tablet onto her desk, with hands still trembling from adrenaline. "He just fell silent, for once in his life. The whole floor is talking about it." Andrew leaned closer, lowering his voice. "They're saying you revealed confidential information, that Morgan is furious, that you're going to be fired." Sophia felt her stomach twist. What if he was right? What if all she had accomplished was to spectacularly sign her own dismissal letter? "They're also saying," Andrew continued, and now there was something akin to admiration in his voice, "that you proved him wrong about the 3 drugs, that no one has spoken to him like that in years. Sophia, you're a legend." But Sophia didn't feel like a legend. She felt exhausted, vulnerable, exposed. She had spilled her deepest pain in front of strangers who would probably use it as office gossip. She had mentioned her mother, she had cried, she had shown weakness in a place where weakness was mercilessly punished. Her phone vibrated. An email from Monica. "My office, now." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. This was it. She was going to be fired. Of course, she was going to be fired. She had defied the CEO. She had called the system that enriched them corrupt. She had... "Go," Andrew gently nudged her. "Whatever it is, you face it. That's what you do, right? Face things." Sophia walked towards Monica's office with steps that felt like walking to her own execution. The executive floor was a different world from the intern area. Thick carpets instead of cheap linoleum, modern art on the walls, the scent of expensive coffee drifting through the air. She knocked on Monica's glass door. "Come in," she heard her mentor's voice. When she entered, she was surprised to find not only Monica, but also Richard Miller, the CFO, and Patricia McDonald, the legal director. All 3 had serious expressions that made Sophia's stomach sink further. "Sit down, Sophia." Monica pointed to a chair in front of her desk. Sophia sat, her hands clasped in her lap to hide their trembling. "If you're going to fire me, I'd appreciate it if you were direct. I need to start looking for another job." "No one is going to fire you," Richard interrupted her. And to Sophia's surprise, there was a small smile on his normally severe face. "At least not today." "We verified your numbers," Patricia continued, opening a thick folder on Monica's desk. Every single one of them. The 7 generic manufacturers waiting, the McGill study, the social media groups organizing the class action lawsuit. She paused dramatically, making Sophia hold her breath. "It's all correct. Terrifyingly correct. So much so that I wonder how on earth our entire market analysis department didn't find it first." Sophia exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "So, I'm not in trouble?" "Oh, you're in enormous trouble," Monica said, but her tone was strange, almost amused. "You just made 3 entire departments look incompetent. People with 6-figure salaries who are supposed to be doing exactly what you did. How do you think they feel about that?" "They probably want to see me dead," Sophia mumbled. "Probably," Richard agreed with brutal honesty. "But here's the situation. Mr. Morgan wants to see you in his private office tomorrow at 7 a.m. 7 a.m.? Sophia blinked. That was before official hours, before most employees arrived. "He says he wants a private conversation with you," Patricia explained. "No witnesses, no recordings, just you and him." Something cold and unpleasant settled in Sophia's chest. "Is that safe?" Monica leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "Sophia, I need to be completely honest with you. Edward Morgan is a brilliant man, but he can also be ruthless. He didn't get where he is by being kind to people who challenge him publicly. I'm telling you to go with your eyes open. Understand that he might try to buy you with money, scare you with threats, or both. And you need to decide right now what you're willing to accept and what you're not." Sophia looked at the 3 people in front of her. All watched her with different mixtures of concern, curiosity, and something that might be respect. "Can I ask you a question?" Sophia finally spoke. "Why are you helping me? All of you have worked here for years. You have established careers. Why risk yourselves for an intern who probably just caused the biggest chaos this company has seen in months?" The 3 exchanged meaningful glances. It was Richard who finally responded. "Why?" he said slowly. "A long time ago, I was also a public university intern, and someone took a risk on me. It's time to return the favor." Patricia nodded. And because, frankly, it's refreshing to see someone stand up to Edward and tell him the truth. It's been too long since anyone did. Plus, Monica added with a sad smile, what you said about your mother, Sophia. My sister died the same way, unable to afford medication that this industry sells at criminal prices. So yes, maybe I'm risking my career, but some things matter more. Sophia felt tears pricking her eyes again. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Monica stood up, walking around the desk to rest a hand on Sophia's shoulder. Just go tomorrow prepared. And Sophia, don't let him intimidate you. You already proved you're smarter than everyone in that boardroom. Don't forget that. That night, in her small, shared apartment on the city's outskirts, Sophia couldn't sleep. Her roommate, Leah Peterson, a nursing student who worked night shifts, had left her alone with her thoughts and the distant sound of traffic. She sat on her bed, opened her old laptop, and for the umpteenth time, reviewed all her data, every number, every source, every projection. She had to be sure, because if Edward Morgan found a single error tomorrow, he would destroy her. Her phone vibrated, an unknown number. Normally she wouldn't answer, but something compelled her to pick up. Sophia Clark, a female voice she didn't recognize. Who is this? My name is Isabelle Tremblay. I'm an investigative journalist for the Globe and Mail. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Sophia tensed immediately. How did you get my number? I have my sources, Isabelle replied vaguely. Listen, I know you had a confrontation with Edward Morgan today. I have witnesses who were in that room. I'd like to ask you some questions about… I have no comment. Sophia cut her off, her heart beating rapidly. And I don't know what you're talking about. Miss Clark, I understand your caution, but I've been investigating Northern Star Pharmaceuticals' pricing practices for 3 years. If you have information the public should know. Good night. Sophia hung up, her hands trembling. This was worse than she thought. The media was involved. Who had leaked information from the meeting? And what else did they know? Her phone rang again. Another unknown number. This time she didn't answer. Then another, and another. 5 calls in 10 minutes, all from different numbers. Sophia turned her phone off completely, her breathing quickening, panic beginning to set in. What had she gotten herself into? At 6:30 a.m. the next morning, Sophia stood in front of the Northern Star Pharmaceuticals building. She had arrived early, unable to stay in her apartment with her phone off, and her mind racing. The security guard recognized her. Miss Clark, Mr. Morgan is waiting for you. 25th floor. The last office down the hall. The 25th floor. The executive floor reserved only for senior management. Sophia had never been there. Interns had no reason to go beyond the 12th floor. The elevator ascended in silence. When the doors opened, Sophia found herself in a luxurious hallway with panoramic views of the waking city. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. She walked down the silent corridor, her steps muffled by the expensive carpet. At the end, she found a solid wooden door with a gold plaque. Edward Morgan, CEO. She took a deep breath and knocked. Come in. She entered an office larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered 360-degree views of the city. The desk was antique mahogany, probably costing more than her entire year's salary. There was original art on the walls, bookshelves filled with leather-bound books, a full bar in one corner. And behind the desk, Edward Morgan watched her with an unreadable expression. Sit down. It wasn't an invitation. It was an order. Sophia sat in a leather chair in front of the desk, her back straight, hands in her lap. Edward studied her in silence for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Do you know how many people have openly defied me in the last 20 years? Sophia shook her head. 3. Edward held up 3 fingers. And do you know what happened to those 3 people? You fired them. 2 of them I promoted, Edward said, surprising her, because they showed courage that most don't have. He paused. The 3rd ended up destroying their career by leaking confidential information to a competitor. The message was crystal clear. I didn't leak anything, Sophia said firmly. Everything I presented is public information. Anyone with internet access and time could have found it, but no one did. Edward leaned back in his chair. Only you? Why? Because no one else had a reason to look, Sophia replied honestly. Your analysts are comfortable. They earn well. They have no incentive to find problems that would make their job harder. I don't have that luxury. And your mother, Edward said, and the change in his tone made Sophia tense. You said she died because she couldn't afford medication that this company manufactures. Yes. What medication? Sophia swallowed. HeartGuard, the same one I talked about yesterday. It cost $2,000 a month, She earned $900 cleaning offices. Edward closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was something different in them. Something Sophia couldn't fully identify. "My father," he said softly, so softly that Sophia had to lean in to listen, "died of a heart attack when I was 15. He worked in a factory 12 hours a day. He couldn't afford the treatment he needed." Sophia gasped. She hadn't expected that. "I built this company," Edward continued, "with the idea that no one else would have to go through that I could make medicines accessible." He stopped, looking out the window at the city. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I became the thing I hated." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. "Why are you telling me this?" Sophia asked finally. Edward looked at her directly. "Because last night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up reading every word of your analysis. And you know what I found?" "What?" "That you were right about everything. Completely, devastatingly correct." He leaned forward. "But here's what I don't understand. Why didn't you go to the press with this? Why didn't you sell this information to the highest bidding competitor? Why waste it on me?" Sophia considered the question carefully before answering. "Because destroying this company doesn't save lives," she said finally. "It just creates a vacuum that another equally corrupt company will fill. But fixing it from the inside, that could make a real difference." Edward studied her with an intensity that was almost physical. "You're idealistic." "I'm realistic," Sophia corrected him. "Idealism is thinking the system will change on its own. Realism is understanding that it takes people willing to fight from the inside to force that change." "And you're willing to fight?" "I already started." Edward let out a short, humorless laugh. Yes, you did." He stood up, walked to the bar, and poured himself a whiskey despite the early hour. "Do you want to know what I'm going to do with you, Sophia Clark? Fire you? Promote you?" he said, turning sharply. "Associate Director of Drug Strategy, reporting directly to me. Salary of $120,000 a year. Office on this floor. You start Monday." Sophia froze. "What?" "You heard right, but there are conditions. There always are. 1. You implement every solution you presented yesterday, personally. If you fail, you're out. Understood? 2. You don't talk to the press, not now, not ever, about what you know about this company." Sophia hesitated. "That sounds like a cover-up." "It's protection," Edward corrected her. "For both of us. You talk, and you destroy any chance of real change. You turn this into a media scandal where no one wins except the lawyers. And 3. Edward stared at her. "You accept that you're going to make enemies. Many. People who have been here for years are going to resent a 2, 3-year-old intern surpassing them. They're going to try to sabotage you. And I won't always be able to protect you." Sophia processed everything. It was too much, too fast. "Why?" she asked. "Why do this?" "Because," Edward returned to his desk, "yesterday you proved to me that I'm an idiot, and I'm smart enough to know when I need smarter people than me on my team." He extended his hand across the desk. "Deal?" Sophia looked at the outstretched hand. This was the decision that would change everything. She could accept entering the system, trying to change it from within. Or she could refuse, maintain her moral purity, and probably achieve nothing. She thought of her mother, of all the mothers, all the people who died not because medicine didn't exist, but because money mattered more than lives. She extended her own hand and shook his firmly. "Deal." Edward smiled, and for the first time, it seemed genuine. "Welcome to hell, Director Clark." When Sophia left that office 20 minutes later, with a contract in her hand and her life completely transformed, the sun had fully risen over the city. She had no idea that the real battles were just beginning, or that the price of her ascent would be far higher than she ever imagined. Monday arrived like a tsunami. Sophia woke at 5 a.m. in her shared apartment. The employment contract still on her bedside table as evidence it hadn't been a dream. Associate Director of Drug Strategy. The words sounded unreal, even after reading them for the 100th time. Leah, her roommate, found her in the kitchen making cheap instant coffee, still in shock. "So, is it real?" Leah asked, sitting in one of their 2 chairs. "You really got promoted from intern to director in 3 days?" "Apparently," Sophia replied, looking at her reflection in the dark window. "Leah, I don't know if I did the right thing. I agreed to enter the system I hate. Or you accepted the opportunity to change it from within." Leah gently corrected her. Her friend was one of the few people who knew her mother's full story. "Your mom would be proud." Sophia felt the familiar knot in her throat. "Or she'd be disappointed that I sold out to the enemy." "Sophia." Leah took her hands across the small table. You didn't sell out, you negotiated. There's a difference. But as Sophia, dressed in the only professional suit she owned, bought second-hand for interviews, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had crossed a point of no return. At 7:30 a.m., Sophia arrived at the Northern Star Pharmaceuticals building. The security guard, who normally barely looked at her, now formally greeted her. Good morning, Director Clark. Your office is ready on the 25th floor. Director Clark. The words sounded strange, as if they were talking about someone else. When she stepped out of the elevator on the 25th floor, she found Monica waiting for her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ready for your first day in hell? She asked, echoing Edward's words. As ready as I can be. Monica led her down the hall. A few things you need to know before the chaos begins. First, the news of your promotion leaked to the rest of the company Friday afternoon. And there are 3 particularly furious people who are going to make your life miserable if they can. They stopped in front of an office with a new plaque. Sophia Clark, Associate Director of Strategy. The office was small compared to those of senior executives, but for someone who had worked in a shared cubicle, it was a palace. First, Monica continued, there's Frank Henderson, Director of Market Analysis, 52 years old, been with the company for 30 years. Your findings basically proved his entire department is incompetent. Great, Sophia mumbled. Second, Gabrielle Dupont, Director of Investor Relations, 45 years old, extremely ambitious. She wanted the position you were given. In fact, she'd been campaigning for months to get it. Better and better. And third, Monica lowered her voice. Alex Henderson, Frank's son, junior manager in the legal department, 28 years old, degrees from expensive universities, and zero tolerance for people who don't come from his same social class. Sophia felt her stomach sink. Why do I feel like you just described a battlefield? Because it is, Monica replied with brutal honesty. Sophia, Edward may have given you the title, but you're going to have to earn the respect. And there are people who are actively working to make sure you fail. As if summoned by the conversation, 3 people appeared at the end of the hallway. An older man in a gray suit and a bitter expression, an impeccably dressed woman with a shark-like smile, and a young man radiating privileged arrogance. Ah, said the woman, Gabrielle Dupont, her voice sweet as poison. So we finally meet the famous miracle intern. They approached, forming an intimidating semicircle. Sophia forced herself to stand firm, not to retreat. Director Clark, Frank Henderson practically spat the title. I hope you understand that this unprecedented promotion will require you to prove yourself worthy. Not all of us believe that 3 days of seniority qualify someone for a directorship. I understand perfectly, Sophia responded, keeping her voice calm despite her accelerated pulse. And I'm ready to prove it. How brave, Alex sneered, looking her up and down with disdain. Though I wonder what exactly you did to get this promotion so quickly, because I don't think it was just your presentation. The implication was clear and disgusting. Sophia felt rage boiling in her veins. Careful, Alex. Monica intervened with an icy voice. That line of thought could be considered harassment. I'm just making an observation. Alex raised his hands in false innocence. In my experience, meteoric promotions usually involve special favors. In my experience, Sophia spoke before she could stop herself. Mediocre men always assume competent women only get ahead through favors, because they themselves couldn't achieve it by merit. The hallway fell into a deathly silence. Alex turned red. Frank looked about to explode. Only Gabrielle smiled as if she had found something entertaining. I see you have character, Gabrielle said softly. That's good. You're going to need it. She turned to leave, but threw a last phrase over her shoulder. Especially when your projections turn out to be wrong. Because believe me, we're going to verify every number, every source, every assumption. She left the threat hanging in the air as the 3 walked away. Sophia leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly weak. Welcome to the real game, Monica said sadly. Now you understand why Edward warned you. The first week was brutal. Sophia worked 1 4-hour days, verifying and re-verifying every aspect of her analysis, anticipating every possible attack. Her office became her second home, the walls covered with graphs, projections, source documents. On Thursday, Frank Henderson called a meeting of the executive committee, specifically to review new Director Clark's methodologies. It was an ambush, disguised as a formal process. The conference room was full. In addition to Frank and his team, Gabrielle, Alex, Richard, Patricia, Monica, and Edward were present at the head of the table, observing everything with an unreadable neutral expression. Director Clark, Frank, began with exaggerated formality. Your analysis of HeartGuard project's losses of $60 million next quarter due to generic competition. However, our department has reviewed the same data and reached very different conclusions. He projected his own presentation on the screen. Professional graphs, impeccable design, numbers that completely contradicted Sophia's. According to our exhaustive analysis, he continued, the projected losses are a maximum of $15 million. Your numbers are inflated by a factor of 4. Can you explain this discrepancy? All eyes turned to Sophia. She could see the barely contained satisfaction on Frank's face. This was what they had been waiting for, to prove she was a fraud. Sophia stood up slowly, walked to the screen. She studied Frank's numbers carefully. Can I explain it? She said finally. Your numbers are based on historical projections from previous generic launches. Correct. Frank smiled smugly. Standard industry methodology, a methodology that ignores 3 critical factors. Sophia connected her own laptop to the screen. First, your projections assume only 3 generic manufacturers will enter the market. But as I already demonstrated, there are 7. She showed the documentation she had collected, updated with even more recent information. Second, she continued, your projections assume a 6-month adoption period, but there's something you didn't consider. She changed the slide, showing a screenshot of a Facebook group with 120,000 members. This is the largest support group for cardiac patients in the country. I've been monitoring it for 2 weeks. There's an organized movement waiting for the exact day generics are approved. They won't wait 6 months. They'll switch in weeks. Several executives leaned forward, interested despite themselves. And third, Sophia showed her last slide. You didn't account for the fact that pharmaceutical companies have changed tactics. Look at these filing documents from the generic manufacturers. She projected pages of regulatory documents that Frank had clearly never seen. Not only are they going to sell cheaper, they're going to give away the first doses for free. Aggressive market penetration strategy. Your historical models don't predict this because it has never happened before. The silence in the room was absolute. Frank stared at the screen with a mixture of shock and growing anger. Where did you get those documents? He asked, in a tense voice. Public database of the regulatory agency, Sophia responded calmly. Section 47. B. Subsection on market strategies. All completely legal and accessible. It's just that no one bothered to look because they assumed the old methods were still sufficient. Edward, who had been observing in silence, spoke for the first time. Frank, did your department review Section 47B? That's normally not necessary, Frank stammered. That's a no, Edward said coldly. Does anyone else have objections to Director Clark's methodologies? No one spoke. Gabrielle looked at Sophia with new evaluation, not necessarily friendly, but with forced respect. Alex looked like he wanted to say something, but restrained himself under his father's gaze. Good. Edward stood up. Then we will proceed with Sophia's recommendations. Frank, I want your department to collaborate fully with her. Understood? Yes, sir, Frank replied in a choked voice. When the meeting ended, the executives left in silence. Frank walked past Sophia without looking at her, but she heard him murmur to Alex, "This isn't over." That night, Sophia was working late in her office when she heard a knock on her door. It was Richard Miller. Still here? He asked, entering without waiting for an invitation. Verifying numbers for the 5th time, Sophia replied, rubbing her tired eyes. I can't give them another chance to find errors. Richard closed the door behind him, his expression serious. Sophia, I need to warn you about something. Frank and Gabrielle are planning something. How do you know? Because I've been in the corporate world for 40 years, and I recognize a conspiracy when I see one. Richard sat in front of her desk. You're a threat to them, not just to their egos, but to their positions. If your reforms work, you prove the old guard is obsolete. So what are they going to do? I don't know exactly, but be careful. Double-check your work. Don't give them any ammunition. After Richard left, Sophia stared at her screens, a feeling of unease settling in her stomach. Her phone vibrated, an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject read, Information you need to see. With trembling hands, she opened the email. Inside was an attachment, scanned documents of what appeared to be internal emails. She read them with growing horror. They were correspondences between Frank, Gabrielle, and an external contact. They discussed ways to sabotage her projects, One of the emails specifically mentioned waiting for her to make a mistake and amplifying it until Morgan has no choice but to fire her. But there was something else, an email that made her blood run cold. If the girl continues to be a problem, we have information about her family situation that could be useful. Her younger brother is still in public school. It would be regrettable if there were complications with his scholarship. Sophia dropped the phone, her breathing quickening. Her brother Daniel was 15. He was in a magnet school on a full scholarship, his only chance out of poverty. These monsters were threatening a child. She dialed Monica's number with trembling hands. Sophia, what's wrong? It's 11 p.m. Monica, I need help. Now. An hour later, Sophia, Monica, Richard, and Patricia were gathered in Monica's office, the emails projected on her screen as evidence of a corporate conspiracy. This is serious, Patricia said, her legal expertise evident in her alarm. This isn't just office politics. This is potentially criminal. Who sent you this? Monica asked. I don't know. The email address is anonymous. It could be a trap, Richard suggested. Someone wanting you to take action based on potentially false information. Or, it could be someone inside who is fed up with their methods, Patricia countered. I've seen these things before. There's always someone with a conscience. What do I do? Sophia asked, her voice cracking. I can't let them hurt my brother. He's just a kid. Monica took her hand. They're not going to hurt anyone, but we also can't go straight to Edward with this without more evidence. We need to be strategic. How strategic? Patricia leaned forward. We document everything. Every interaction you have with Frank, Gabrielle, or Alex. We record, if possible, and we wait for them to make a mistake. Meanwhile, Richard added, we make sure your work is so impeccable that they can't find anything to use against you. Sophia looked at the three people who had supported her from the beginning. Why are you risking so much for me? Because, Monica responded simply, if we let them destroy you, we send a message to everyone in this company that challenging the status quo is too dangerous, and then nothing will ever change. On Friday morning, Sophia arrived at her office to find a manila envelope on her desk. It had no sender. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten message. Be careful, in today's meeting. They've prepared something. You're not alone. A friend. Sophia crumpled the paper, her heart beating rapidly. What meeting? She checked her calendar. There was a general strategy meeting at 2 p.m. called by Edward to review the progress on implementing her recommendations. She spent the next few hours preparing for any possible scenario. She checked every number 3 times. She prepared backup documentation for every claim. She rehearsed answers to difficult questions. When she entered the conference room at 2 o'clock, the tension was palpable. Frank and Gabrielle were already there, talking in low voices. Alex was with them, looking at his phone with a satisfied smile. Edward entered last, along with 3 people Sophia didn't recognize. 2 men and a woman, all in expensive suits and serious expressions. Before we begin, Edward announced, I want to introduce our external auditors. They have been reviewing our financial projections and analysis processes for the past 2 weeks. Sophia felt her stomach drop. External auditors. Frank must have hired them to find errors in her work. The lead auditor, a woman in her 40s, opened her portfolio. We have completed our review of the projections and methodologies presented by Director Clark. The silence in the room was absolute. Sophia could see Frank trying to hide a satisfied smile. And we must say, the auditor continued, and Sophia closed her eyes, bracing for the worst, that this is the most comprehensive and accurate risk analysis work we have seen in this industry in the last decade. Sophia's eyes snapped open. What? Her projections are not only correct, the auditor showed her own analysis, but conservative. If anything, the potential losses could be greater than she estimated. Her work is exceptional. Frank had turned pale. Gabrielle stared at the auditors as if they had betrayed some secret agreement. Edward leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. Thank you for the assessment. That's all we needed to hear. When the auditors left, Edward looked directly at Frank. Anything you want to say, Frank? We were just being diligent, Frank stammered. Of course, Edward said coldly. Good. Now that we've established that Sophia's projections are solid, let's proceed with the implementations. Sophia, you have the floor. For the next hour, Sophia presented her detailed action plan. Every step, every timeline, every success metric. She spoke with confidence that came not from arrogance, but from absolute preparation. When she finished, Edward nodded. Excellent. We will proceed as you recommended. Frank, your department will fully support these efforts. Any objections? Frank shook his head, defeated. As the meeting dissolved, Sophia gathered her things, still processing what had happened. Edward stopped her before she left. "The auditors weren't Frank's idea," he said in a low voice. "I hired them 2 weeks ago. I needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" "That you really were as good as you seemed," Edward replied. "And you are." "But Sophia," his expression turned serious, "be careful. You just publicly humiliated powerful people twice. They won't forget it." Sophia nodded, but internally she felt something change. She was no longer the scared intern who had entered this company months ago. She was a director who had proven her worth and was ready for the war to come, because now she understood the truth. In the corporate world, winning one battle only earns you more enemies, and the hardest battles were yet to come. 3 weeks after the triumph with the auditors, Sophia began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. Her implementations were working exactly as she had projected. HeartGuard losses had been significantly mitigated. The McGill study had come out, but thanks to her advanced preparation, the company had launched a medical education campaign that softened the blow. Even Frank had begun to work with her professionally, though coldly. Gabrielle greeted her in the hallways with icy politeness. Only Alex continued to look at her with barely contained disdain. Sophia should have known it was the calm before the storm. On Wednesday morning, she arrived at her office to find Monica waiting for her. Her face was pale in a way that immediately set off all of Sophia's alarms. "What happened?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Monica handed her a tablet without a word. On the screen was an article from a financial news blog. The headline made Sophia's world stop. "Scandal at Northern Star Pharmaceuticals. Director accused of manipulating data to sabotage drug launch." With trembling hands, Sophia read the article. It cited anonymous internal sources, alleging that she had deliberately exaggerated the risks of the drug MindMend to delay its launch, supposedly because she had connections with a competing company. "This is a lie," Sophia whispered, the article falling from her hands. "All of this is completely false. I would never." "I know," Monica said firmly. "Everyone who knows you knows it. But Sophia, this is serious. They're accusing you of corporate fraud. If this gains traction..." Sophia's phone began to vibrate. Then Monica's. Messages flooded both devices. The article was going viral in financial circles. "Edward wants to see you," Monica said now. Edward's office was full when Sophia arrived. In addition to the CEO, Richard, Patricia, and to Sophia's horror, Frank, Gabrielle, and Alex were present, all with expressions that ranged from feigned concern to barely hidden satisfaction. "Sit down," Edward ordered. His voice was cold in a way Sophia hadn't heard since their first meeting. Sophia sat, feeling as if she were in a courtroom. "Did you read the article?" Edward asked. "Yes, and everything in it is false." "Do you have any connection with Global Pharma?" Patricia asked, her tone professionally neutral. "Global Pharma? No, I've never worked for them. I've never spoken to them. I don't know anyone who works there." "The article says you have a cousin who works in their development department," Gabrielle intervened, her voice dripping with false concern. "Is that true?" Sophia froze. Yes, my cousin Justin works there, but we haven't spoken in years. I didn't even know what department he was in." "But it's a connection," Frank pointed out, leaning forward. "A connection you didn't disclose when you joined this project." "Because it's not relevant," Sophia protested, feeling the trap closing. "My cousin and I aren't close. I haven't spoken to him since my mother's funeral." "Still, it's a potential conflict of interest," Patricia said. And Sophia could see the lawyer calculating legal risks. "Sophia, do you understand that this puts the company in a very difficult position?" Edward asked. "But I didn't do anything wrong." Sophia's voice broke. "My analyses were honest. You can verify every source, every number, every..." "We're already doing that," Edward interrupted her. "But in the meantime, I have investors calling, reporters asking questions, and a growing scandal that could cost this company millions in credibility." "Mr. Morgan," Gabrielle spoke, her voice full of false sympathy. "Perhaps it would be best for Sophia to take a temporary leave, just until this is resolved, to protect both her and the company." Sophia felt real panic. A temporary leave in the corporate world was basically a disguised dismissal. "No," she said firmly, looking directly at Edward. "I'm not going to run from false accusations. Give me 24 hours to prove my innocence." Edward studied her with an unreadable expression. "You have 12. If by this time tomorrow you don't have solid evidence that this is a smear campaign, I'm going to have to make difficult decisions." Sophia left that office feeling as if she had been punched in the stomach. Monica followed her to her own office. "We're gonna fix this, Monica," she said with determination. "We have 12 hours. We can." "This was planned," Sophia interrupted her mind working at a frantic pace. "The mention of my cousin. Someone investigated my family, found that connection, and used it to create a narrative. Frank, Gabrielle, or Alex." Monica agreed. "Or all three." Sophia's phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Normally she wouldn't answer, but something compelled her to pick up. Sophia Clark, a female voice. "I'm Isabelle Tremblay, the journalist who tried to contact you weeks ago." "I have no comment," Sophia began to say. "Wait, please. I know about the article, and I know who wrote it." Sophia stopped. "What?" "The blogger who published that story. I know his work. He's known for publishing paid articles. Someone paid him to write that about you." "How do you know?" "Because I've been investigating corrupt practices in the pharmaceutical industry for 3 years," Isabel responded. "And I've seen this pattern before. Can we meet? I think I can help you." Sophia looked at Monica, who had overheard part of the conversation. "Where?" An hour later, Sophia and Monica were in a small cafe, 3 blocks from the corporate building. Isabelle Tremblay turned out to be a 35-year-old woman with a laptop full of files and the expression of someone who had seen too much corruption. "I've been following your story since your first meeting with Morgan," Isabelle explained. "I have contacts inside the company. When I saw the article this morning, I immediately knew it was fabricated." "Can you prove it?" Sophia asked desperately. "Better than that, I can show you who paid for it." Isabelle opened her laptop, showing a series of bank transfers she had traced. The blogger received $5,000 a week ago from a corporate account registered to the name of. She turned the screen. Sophia read the name and felt her blood run cold. Gabrielle Dupont. "Not only that," Isabelle continued, showing more documents. "I also have emails between Gabrielle, Frank, and a law firm discussing how to neutralize the Clark threat. They used those exact words." Monica leaned in to see better. "How did you get this?" "Someone inside the company leaked them to me," Isabelle replied. "Someone who is fed up with seeing how they destroy talented people who threaten the status quo." "Who?" Sophia asked. "I can't reveal it, but this person wants you to have this." She handed her a USB drive. Everything is there. The emails, the transfers, even audio recordings of meetings where they planned this. Sophia took the USB drive with trembling hands. "Why are you helping me? What do you gain?" Isabelle looked at her directly. "Because 5 years ago, I wrote an article exposing similar practices at another pharmaceutical company. They sued me. I almost lost my career, and the person who helped me was professionally destroyed. Since then, I promised I would never let it happen again if I could avoid it." She paused. "And because your story about your mother, my father died the same way from medication he couldn't afford. So yes, this is personal for me too." Sophia returned to the office with evidence that could destroy Gabrielle, Frank, and Alex. But as she went up in the elevator, a terrible realization struck her. If she exposed this, she would unleash a war within the company. There would be investigations, potentially legal cases, probably firings, and she would be seen as the person who caused all that chaos. Her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Your brother Daniel left school 20 minutes ago. What a nice boy. It would be terrible if something happened to him." Attached was a photo of her brother walking down the street, clearly taken that day. Sophia felt pure terror flood her. She called Daniel immediately. "Hello?" Her brother's voice sounded normal, carefree. "Daniel, where are you?" "I'm on my way home." "Why?" "Sophia, you're crying." "Listen to me very carefully." Sophia tried to control her trembling voice. "I want you to go straight to Mrs. Rodriguez's house, our neighbor. Don't talk to strangers. Don't stop anywhere. Do you understand? You're scaring me. Please, just do it. I'll call you in 10 minutes. She hung up and immediately called Monica. "They're threatening my brother. I have a photo." "Monica, he's a kid. He's 15. What do I do?" "I'm on my way. Don't move." But before Monica could arrive, Sophia's office door opened. Alex entered, closing the door behind him. "I see you got our message," he said with a cold smile. Sophia stood up, rage and fear mixing dangerously. "You're threatening a minor. That's a crime." Alex raised his hands in false innocence. "I didn't threaten anyone. I just commented that it would be terrible if something happened to your brother. There's a lot of crime in your neighborhood. You know what they want? We want you to resign today. Now, sign your resignation letter. Disappear, and your brother will be perfectly safe. And if I don't? Alex leaned over her desk, his breath smelling of expensive coffee and malice. Then, that article today will only be the beginning. We have more, much more. And your little brother could have some very unfortunate accidents. The door opened abruptly. Monica stormed in, followed by Patricia. Get out of here, Alex, Monica ordered. I was just having a conversation with my colleague. Alex responded softly, but he headed towards the door. Before leaving, he looked at Sophia. Think about it. You have until tomorrow to decide. When he left, Sophia collapsed in her chair, her whole body trembling. I recorded everything, a voice said from the doorway. Richard was standing there, holding his phone. Every word. Extortion, threat, coercion, threats against a minor. We have enough to press criminal charges. Sophia looked at the USB drive on her desk, then her phone with the threatening photo of her brother, then at the 3 people who had risked their careers to support her. I need to speak to Edward, she said finally. Now. And I need all of you to come with me. 15 minutes later, they were all in Edward's office. Sophia connected the USB drive to her laptop. Patricia prepared Alex's recording, and Richard had documentation of all the irregularities they had found. This had better be important, Edward said, but his tone changed when he saw their expressions. What happened? Sophia took a deep breath. I'm going to show you exactly how far Gabrielle, Frank, and Alex are willing to go to destroy me, and then you'll have to decide what kind of company you want to run. Over the next hour, they presented everything. The emails planning her destruction, the money transfers for the fake article, the recording of Alex threatening her brother, the documents showing a pattern of similar behavior against other employees in the past. Edward listened in absolute silence, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When they finished, he stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the city as the sun began to set. Do you know what's the saddest thing about all this? He said finally. That part of me already knew. I've seen signs for years, but I chose to ignore them because Frank, Gabrielle, and their people generated results. He turned to them. How many good employees did I lose because they were threatened this way and I never realized it? Too many, Richard replied in a low voice. Edward returned to his desk, picked up his phone. Call security. I want Gabrielle Dupont, Frank Henderson, and Alex Henderson escorted out of the building immediately. Dismissals for cause, without severance. And Patricia, I want you to file criminal charges against Alex for the threats against Sophia's brother. Sir, Patricia began. Did you say something I didn't hear? Edward asked, with a voice of steel. No, sir. I'll do it immediately. Edward looked at Sophia. And you? I owe you an apology. I should have believed you immediately this morning. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have investigated before letting them put you in that position. He paused. Sophia, what you're doing here, the changes you're implementing, are exposing decades of corruption that I allowed to grow because it was easier to ignore it than to confront it. And now? Sophia asked. Now we clean up this company completely, and you are going to lead that effort. Promotion, effective immediately. Vice President of Strategy and Ethical Compliance, with authority to investigate any department and report directly to me. Sophia felt dizzy. That's terrifying. I know, Edward said, but you are the only person in this company I completely trust to do it right. An hour later, Gabrielle, Frank, and Alex were escorted from the building by security. Employees watched from the windows as the 3 who had terrorized so many were publicly humiliated in the same way they had humiliated others. Sophia watched from her office without feeling triumph, only deep exhaustion. Monica approached, resting a hand on her shoulder. You did it. You won. It doesn't feel like victory, Sophia murmured. It never does, Monica responded. But you saved lives, including yours and your brother's. That's what matters. Sophia's phone rang. Daniel. Sophia, what's going on? There are police at the house saying they're going to protect me. Everything's all right now, Daniel. Everything's going to be fine. As she hung up, Sophia looked at her reflection in the dark window. The scared intern from months ago had completely disappeared. In her place was an executive who had faced corruption, threats, and betrayal and had survived. But the war was not over yet, because cleaning up decades of corruption would require more than firing 3 people, and Sophia had just become the most powerful and most hated person at Northern Star Pharmaceuticals at the same time. The question was, could she survive? What came next? The days following the expulsion of Gabrielle, Frank, and Alex were strangely silent, as if the entire company was holding its breath. waiting to see what would happen next. Sophia walked through the hallways of the 25th floor with a mixture of relief and nervous anticipation. She had won the battle, yes, but she knew that wars were made up of multiple battles, and this was just the beginning. On Monday morning, a week after the firings, Edward called a general company meeting, not in a conference room, but in the main auditorium of the building, with a capacity for 500 people. All employees, from executives to cleaning staff, were invited. Sophia arrived early, finding Monica, Richard, and Patricia already seated in the front row. "Do you know what this is about?" Sophia asked them in a low voice. "Edward didn't tell me anything," Monica responded, but there was a small smile on her lips. "But I have a theory." The auditorium quickly filled. Employees murmured among themselves, speculating. Rumors about what had happened had spread like wildfire, though official details had been scarce. At 9 o'clock, Edward walked onto the stage. He wasn't wearing his usual three-piece suit. Instead, he wore casual trousers and a simple shirt. Sophia had never seen him look so human. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice amplified by the microphones, but softer than usual. "I know it's been a difficult week. I know there are rumors, questions, concerns, and you deserve answers." The auditorium fell into absolute silence. "A week ago, I fired 3 high-level individuals from this company," Edward continued. "Not for financial reasons, not for restructuring, but because they violated the fundamental values that this company should represent." He paused, looking directly at the audience. "For years, I allowed a culture of fear and manipulation to develop. A culture where people could rise not by merit, but by politics, where talented employees were destroyed if they threatened the status quo, where ethics were optional if the results were good." Several employees exchanged significant glances. Clearly, they weren't the only ones who had experienced that. "This ends today," Edward said firmly. "From this moment on, Northern Star Pharmaceuticals will operate under a new set of principles, and I will be completely transparent with all of you about what they mean." He activated a presentation on the large screen behind him. The first slide simply said, "Integrity first. Our first principle. Integrity is non-negotiable," he explained. "We will not launch products that harm patients just because they are profitable. We will not tolerate harassment, manipulation, or sabotage among employees, and we will not charge prices that kill people just because we can get away with it." The murmur that swept through the auditorium was a mixture of shock and cautious hope. Second principle. Merit matters more than connections. Edward continued. "I don't care what university you came from, or who your family is. If you have talent and work hard, you will have opportunities. And if not, you won't, no matter your last name." Sophia felt tears pricking her eyes. This was more than she had hoped for. And third, Edward showed the last slide. "We will be a company that saves lives, not one that sacrifices them for profit." He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "My father died when I was 15 because he couldn't afford medical treatment. I built this company with the promise that I would never let that happen to anyone else. At some point, I forgot that promise. I became exactly the kind of company that let my father die." The silence now was different. It was respect, mixed with understanding. But a 2-3-year-old woman, Edward looked directly at Sophia, had the courage to remind me who I was supposed to be. And for that, we should all be grateful. All eyes turned to Sophia. She felt her face burn. But Edward wasn't finished. Sophia Clark started here as an intern 7 months ago. She was ignored, belittled, and actively sabotaged by people who should have been mentoring her. But she didn't give up, and when she finally had the chance to speak, she proved to us that she knew more than executives with decades of experience. Edward stepped down from the stage, walking to where Sophia was seated. "Stand up, please." Sophia stood with trembling legs, unsure what to expect. Effective immediately, Edward announced to the entire room. "Sophia Clark is promoted to Vice President of Strategy and Ethical Compliance. She will report directly to me and will have the authority to investigate any practice in this company that violates our new principles." The applause started slowly, then grew deafening. Employees stood up, some with tears, others with genuine smiles. It wasn't just applause for Sophia. It was applause for the hope that things could change. When the noise finally subsided, Edward continued. "But Sophia's promotion isn't just recognition, it's a message. The message is this: if you have talent, if you have integrity, if you are willing to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, you will have a future in this company, no matter where you come from." He looked around the auditorium. "And if you are someone who thrived under the old system, someone who used fear and manipulation to get ahead. This is your warning. Change or leave, because there is no place for you here anymore. After the meeting, Sophia was surrounded by employees wanting to congratulate her. But there was something else in their faces besides congratulation. It was hope. It was the beginning of belief that maybe, just maybe, their own voices could be heard too. A woman in her 40s timidly approached. "Director Clark, I'm sorry, Vice President Clark. Please, call me Sophia," she responded, noticing how Teresa Kowalczuk's hands trembled. My name is Teresa Kowalczuk. I work in the quality department. There's something I need to report about one of our testing processes. I've tried to report it before, but it was always ignored. And I'm afraid it could harm patients." Sophia felt her stomach tighten. "Tell me everything. In my office now." Over the next hour, Teresa revealed irregularities in the testing process of one of their newest drugs. Nothing criminal, but definitely concerning. The kind of thing that would have been ignored under the old regime because fixing it would cost time and money. "Thank you for reporting this," Sophia said when Teresa finished. "I'm going to investigate it personally. And, Teresa, I want you to know that you will never have to fear retaliation for telling the truth. Never." Teresa left with tears of relief in her eyes. Monica, who had been observing from the doorway, entered when Teresa left. "This is going to be your life now. People who have been silent for years finally feeling they can speak." "I know," Sophia responded, feeling overwhelmed, but also energized. "And I'm going to listen to every single one of them." That night, Sophia arrived home later than usual. Leah was waiting for her with a simple dinner they shared. "I saw the videos," Leah said as they ate. "The meeting today. Sophia, you're viral again." "What?" Leah showed her phone. The video of Edward's speech, especially the part where he promoted Sophia, had been viewed more than 2 million times in the past few hours. The comments were overwhelmingly positive, from intern to VP in 7 months. "This is the story everyone needs to see. Finally, a company doing the right thing." I cried when he talked about his father. "This is real leadership." Sophia read the comments, processing that her story was now public in ways she never anticipated. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something compelled her to. Sophia Clark. A male, older voice she didn't recognize. "Who is this?" "My name is Robert Carmichael. I'm the CEO of Continental Pharma. Do you have a moment?" Sophia tensed. Continental was one of Northern Star Pharmaceuticals' largest competitors. "For what?" "To tell you that what you are doing is extraordinary, and to ask if you would be interested in meeting with me. Not to offer you a job," he quickly added, "but to learn. Because if you can change your culture, maybe we can too." Sophia felt something change in her chest. It wasn't just her company that was changing. It was the beginning of something bigger. "I'd love to meet," she responded. "When?" Days turned into weeks. Sophia worked 6-hour days, investigating every report that arrived in her office, implementing new ethical compliance systems, training managers in the new principles. It was exhausting. There were days when she wanted to quit, when the magnitude of the task seemed impossible. But then, she remembered why she started. One afternoon, 3 weeks after her promotion, Richard knocked on her door. "I have something to show you," he said, his face serious but with a strange twinkle in his eyes. He led her to the conference room, where a group of people were waiting. Sophia recognized several finance executives, analysts, product managers. "What is this?" she asked. "It's the team that's going to help you implement something Edward and I have been planning," Richard explained. "Sophia, we want you to lead a completely new initiative." He activated a presentation on the screen. The title took her breath away: the Rose Clark Free Medication Access Program. "The idea is simple," Richard explained. "Families who cannot afford our medications receive them for free, completely free, with no complicated paperwork, no bureaucracy, just a simple application and verification of financial need." But that, Sophia quickly calculated, that would cost millions. $20 million a year according to our projections, Richard confirmed. "But we crunched the numbers. With the efficiencies you've implemented, with the costs we've reduced by eliminating corruption, we can absorb it. And the impact on reputation could be worth much more." Sophia looked at the presentation, tears beginning to form. "My mother would have qualified for this." "I know," Richard said softly. "That's why Edward wants to name it the Rose Clark Program, in honor of your mother." Sophia couldn't hold back the tears. She cried openly in front of everyone in that room, and none of them judged her. Some cried with her. "When do we start?" she finally asked, wiping her eyes. Now, Richard responded, if you agree to lead it. I accept. Over the next few weeks, Sophia worked with the team to design every aspect of the program. Eligibility criteria that were fair but not exploitable. Application processes that were simple for people without formal education. Verification systems that protected against fraud without humiliating applicants. It was the most important work she had ever done, because every detail meant the difference between someone living or dying. The launch of the Rose Clark program was scheduled for a month later. But 2 weeks before the launch, something unexpected happened. Sophia was in her office when she received a call from the main reception. Vice President Clark, there's someone here to see you. Says he's family. Sophia tensed. Who? He says he's your brother, Daniel. Sophia ran down to the lobby, finding her 5-year-old brother standing there with a nervous expression. Daniel, what happened? Are you okay? I'm fine, Daniel responded quickly. But I needed to talk to you, and not on the phone. She led him to her office, closing the door. What's wrong? Daniel took a deep breath. Sophia, at school, everyone's talking about you, about what you did, and I. He stopped, struggling with the words. I'm so proud of you. I don't know how to express it, he finally said, tears in his eyes. But I also feel guilty. Guilty of what? Because when Mom was sick, I didn't do anything. I was just a scared kid who hid in his room, and you took care of her. You worked, you studied, you did everything. And now you're changing the whole world, so no one else has to go through what we did. Sophia hugged her brother, both of them crying. Daniel, you were 12. You didn't have to do anything except be a kid. But I want to do something now, Daniel said, pulling away to look at her. I want to study medicine. I want to be the kind of doctor who helps people like Mom. And I want you to know that everything you're doing matters. It really matters. It was one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking moments of Sophia's life, because she finally understood that her work wasn't just about changing a company or an industry. It was about giving hope to her brother and to millions of brothers and sisters who were watching, learning that change was possible, that one person could make a difference, and that the hardest battles were worth fighting. The day of the official launch of the Rose Clark program arrived with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness that made Sophia barely able to breathe. They had organized a press event in the main auditorium, inviting not only media, but also patient organizations, community groups, and anyone who wanted to attend. Sophia arrived early that morning, finding the auditorium already half full, even though the event was 2 hours away. She stopped at the entrance, observing the people. Mothers with their children, elderly people in wheelchairs, entire families who had traveled from distant provinces. They came to see if it's real. Monica appeared beside her. Because for many of them, this sounds too good to be true. Then we have to show them it's real, Sophia responded, feeling the weight of all those hopes on her shoulders. The event began with Edward giving a welcome. But he quickly passed the microphone to Sophia. My name is Sophia Clark, she began, her voice clear despite her nerves. And 3 years ago, my mother died because she couldn't afford the medication she needed. The auditorium fell into absolute silence. Television cameras recorded every word. The medication cost $2,000 a month. She earned $900 cleaning offices. She did the calculations over and over again, looking for ways to make it work. But the math was relentless. There was no way. Sophia felt tears forming, but she didn't stop them. So she chose. She chose to buy food for my brother and me, instead of her medicine. She chose to pay the rent instead of her treatment. She chose our survival over hers. Several people in the audience were openly crying now, and I spent 3 years wondering what would have happened if the system had been different. What would have happened if pharmaceutical companies valued lives as much as profits? What would have happened if someone, somewhere, had said this isn't right and had done something about it? She paused, looking directly at the cameras. Today, we are doing something about it. She activated the presentation behind her. The Rose Clark program offers completely free access to all our medications for families who cannot afford them. No complicated paperwork, no years of waiting, no humiliation. She explained the simple process, an online or phone application, basic income verification, and approval within 72 hours. Because when someone needs medicine, they don't have time for bureaucracy. We estimate, Sophia continued, that this program will help approximately 50,000 patients in the first year. 50,000 people who would otherwise have to choose between medicine and food. 50,000 families who will not have to live with the guilt that I live with. Her voice cracked. I cannot bring my mother back to life, but I can ensure that her death meant something, that it changed something, that it saved lives. The applause was deafening, but Sophia raised her hand, asking for silence. "Don't applaud me yet, because this is just the beginning." She looked at Edward, who nodded from his seat. "Northern Star Pharmaceuticals publicly commits today to reduce the price of all our medications by an average of 40% over the next 2 years. And we challenge other pharmaceutical companies to do the same." The murmur that swept through the auditorium was a mixture of shock and disbelief. "I know some will say it's impossible, that it will sacrifice profits, that shareholders will never accept it," Sophia continued. "But I'm going to tell you something I've learned in these last few months. Change only seems impossible until someone has the courage to make the impossible possible." After the event, while the media interviewed Edward and other executives, Sophia slipped away to a quiet room. She needed a moment to process everything. She found someone waiting for her there, a woman in her 30s with a small child in her arms. "Excuse me for following you," the woman said nervously, "but I needed to speak with you personally." "No problem," Sophia responded gently. "How can I help you?" "My name is Carmen Davies. My son, Matthew, has leukemia. He needs a medication that costs $7,000 a month. And her eyes filled with tears, "we can't afford it. I've been stealing food from my job just so I can buy even half the dose." Sophia felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. This woman, this child, were her mother and her 3 years ago. "The medication Matthew needs," Sophia asked. "Is it produced by Northern Star Pharmaceuticals?" Carmen nodded, crying freely now. "Then he qualifies for the Rose Clark program," Sophia said firmly. "He's going to receive his full medication for free, starting today." "Today?" Carmen looked in disbelief. "But they said 72 hours. For critical cases like Matthew's, it's immediate." Sophia took out her phone, dialing the program team directly. "Hello. Yes, I have a patient here who needs emergency approval." She gave the details, while Carmen looked at her as if she were a living miracle. 15 minutes later, everything was arranged. Matthew would receive his full medication that same day at the hospital pharmacy. "I don't know how to thank you," Carmen sobbed, hugging her son to her chest. You saved my baby's life." "Don't thank me," Sophia responded, her own tears falling. "Thank my mother. She's the one who made this possible." When Carmen and Matthew left, Sophia remained alone in that room, crying with a mixture of pain for her mother and joy that her death finally had purpose. That night, Sophia visited the cemetery where her mother was buried. She hadn't come since the day she accepted the job with Edward 7 months ago. She sat next to the simple headstone, wiping away fallen leaves. "Hi, Mom," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry I haven't been here sooner. Things have been intense." The night wind blew softly through the trees. "We launched the program today, the one named after you. And Mom, you should have seen the faces of those families, the hope they had, the gratitude for something that should be a basic right, but which this system treats as a privilege." Sophia wiped away her tears. "I met a woman today, Carmen. She has a son with leukemia. She was doing exactly what you did, sacrificing herself so her son could have medicine. And I was able to tell her that she doesn't have to anymore, that her son will receive full, free treatment." Her voice broke completely, and as she said it, all she could think was, "I wish someone had told you that, Mom. I wish someone had saved you like I saved Matthew today." She sobbed openly, all the pain of 3 years finally coming out. "But no one did, and that breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to know that you died not because medicine didn't exist, but because money mattered more than your life." She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "But your death was not in vain, Mom. It changed everything. It changed me, it changed that company, and now it's changing the whole system. Other companies are calling, wanting to know how we did it, wanting to replicate it. I can't bring you back to life," Sophia continued, placing fresh flowers on the grave. "But I can make your death mean something. I can save the next 50,000 mothers, and that's exactly what I'm going to do." She stood up, drying her tears. "I love you, Mom, and I'm going to keep fighting for you, for Carmen, for Matthew, for everyone." As she walked back to her car, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Edward. "Turn on the news." Sophia got into her car, searching for the radio. The national news program was broadcasting, "Developing tonight." The launch of the Rose Clark program has sparked a national conversation about access to medication. 3 competing pharmaceutical companies have announced in the past few hours that they are developing similar programs. Analysts are calling it the Clark effect, the idea that ethics and profits are not mutually exclusive. Sophia listened, stunned. as different experts discussed the implications of what Northern Star Pharmaceuticals had started. This could fundamentally change how the pharmaceutical industry operates, an economist was saying. If multiple companies adopt these models, we're potentially looking at a complete transformation of the system. 2 weeks later, Sofia was invited to testify before a parliamentary committee on pharmaceutical pricing reform. Senators and members of parliament from across the political spectrum wanted to hear how Northern Star Pharmaceuticals had achieved the impossible. She sat in front of the panel, aware of the cameras broadcasting live, of the millions watching. Vice President Clark, the Senate chair, began. Your story has captured the nation's attention. Can you tell us what made this transformation possible? Sofia thought carefully before answering. Senator, what made the change possible was not money or power or connections. It was pain turned into purpose. Can you elaborate? Every person who led this change had a personal story of loss, Sofia explained. I lost my mother. Edward Morgan lost his father. Monica Dubois lost her sister. We all understood the human cost of this system because we lived it. She leaned forward. And that's what needs to change at a national level. Not just policies or regulations, although those are important. We need people in power to remember that behind every statistic, there's a family, there's a mother choosing between food and medicine. There's a child wondering why their mom is sick. But politically, another senator intervened. How do we convince companies to sacrifice profits? They're not sacrificing profits, Sofia corrected firmly. Northern Star Pharmaceuticals is still profitable, just less obscenely profitable. And there's a difference between reasonable profits and exploitation. The room fell silent. Look, Sofia continued, her passion growing. No one is saying pharmaceutical companies shouldn't make money. Research and development cost money. But when a drug costs $20 to produce and sells for $2,000, that's not capitalism, it's cruelty. The clip of that testimony went viral instantly. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed 50 million times. Hashtags like Number Justice for Patients and Number the Clark Effect trended globally. 3 months after the program's launch, Sofia was in her office reviewing reports when Edward entered without knocking. You need to see this, he said, his face showing emotion he rarely revealed. He opened his laptop, showing financial numbers. These are the results from the last quarter. Sofia studied the numbers, her heart racing. Profits went up, 5%. Up? Edward confirmed with a smile. Despite reducing prices, despite the free program, despite everything, profits went up. How? Volume. When you make medicine accessible, more people can afford it. And reputation. Our brand value went up 40%. Investors see long-term stability instead of short-term quick profits. Edward closed the laptop. Sofia, you just proved that doing the right thing is also good for business, and that changes everything. That night, Sofia was home with Leah when her brother Daniel called. His voice excited. Sofia, I got in. You got in where? To the pre-med program at the University of Toronto. On a full scholarship. I'm going to be a doctor. Sofia felt tears of joy. Daniel, that's incredible. And it's thanks to you, Daniel continued. Because your story inspired me. Because you showed me that we can change the system from within. And I'm going to be the kind of doctor who treats patients regardless of whether they can pay. After hanging up, Sofia stared out the window of her apartment, reflecting on how far they had come. 7 months ago, she was an invisible intern who cleaned up spilled coffee and endured daily humiliations. Now she was a vice president at one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country, leading a transformation that was changing an entire industry. But more important than titles or money or recognition was this. Her mother had not died in vain. Her pain had created real change, and 50,000 patients this year would not have to choose between living and eating. On her desk, Sofia kept 3 things. A photo of her mother, smiling in better days. A photo of Matthew, the boy with leukemia, who was now in remission thanks to having full access to his treatment. And a quote she herself had written and framed. The system doesn't change because we expect it to be fair. It changes because ordinary people find extraordinary courage to make it fair. Every time she doubted, every time the struggle seemed impossible, she looked at those photos and that quote and remembered the fundamental truth that one person can make a difference, that pain can be turned into purpose, that the hardest battles are the ones most worth fighting, and that sometimes the most underestimated people are exactly the ones who change the world. Sofia Clark had started as a nobody, but she had proved that nobody could become somebody who mattered, not because she was special or exceptional, but because she dared to believe she deserved to be heard. and had the courage not to give up when the world told her she didn't matter. That was the real lesson. That was the real fortune. And that was the story that 50 million people had seen, cried over, and shared. The story of a young woman who lost her mother, but saved thousands of other mothers. The story of a CEO who had forgotten his humanity but rediscovered it. The story of a company that chose lives over obscene profits. And the story that proved that change doesn't require perfection. It just requires one person somewhere to say this isn't right and have the courage to do something about it. Sophia Clark was that person, and her story was just beginning.